Whether you had a nap or not, welcome back to part 2 of our episode with Roberta Barroca. Here we go.
I think it's interesting though, because one of the things that I remember talking to people about and talking to other interpreters about, thankfully I found some friendly interpreters fairly quickly, but this idea that when I first entered the profession, or tried to enter the profession about 9 or so years ago, the interpreters who seemed to be the most experienced seemed to be the least approachable. One friendly one, but apart from that was it. What I love now is you have people like you talking about the subjects that interpreters have always needed to talk about, but doing so in a way that doesn't come across as didactic or, I'm the teacher, you're the student, deal with it. We're now happy enough with our profession that we can laugh and just say, look, we're all learning this, we're all making mistakes, and probably we'll look back in another 10 years and go, me with 10-year-old experience, how could you do such a silly thing? The fact that interpreters now are okay with going, we've all done something stupid, so let's actually work together is much, much better. I think it's a much friendlier profession for people to enter than it ever has been, precisely because we can say this stuff and know that we're not going to lose our careers over it.
Yeah, but I think we definitely want to talk about the your other 2 articles, Roberta, the My Boothmate ones, so the love story and the heartbreak. So in this case, is this based on a true story as well? I suppose it is.
So both the love story and the heartbreak are fictitious stories. That's the thing.
Really?
I want it really completely fictitious.
So you haven't divorced your husband yet? That's good.
I have not, no. And my husband will probably become an interpreter one day too, because I'm kind of teaching him how to do it. Because I've been traveling around all the time. I just want to be with him. So, he might as well become an interpreter and we'll travel around the world together working.
Alex can give you tips on how that works.
Really? Oh, I really want to listen to that, Alex.
Okay.
So the story is, I wanted to talk about good booth manners and bad manners. But as I said, a lot has been written about that and in the same way. So I wanted to approach it differently. So I just thought about the best things that ever happened to me when working with somebody and just assembled it into one story, and then the worst things that have ever happened to me into the other story, which is the heartbreak. But they're both fictitious.
It's strange because, when you read the stories, they really sound so true and maybe not 100%, but at least a lot of things in that are things I think that we've seen in boothmates or in colleagues. So it's...
Exactly. Yeah, but because they were inspired by true events, but it was like a collage of stuff that I've been through.
But I think at least the love story one, I think we could use as kind of an example, right? Something to aspire to, I guess. What do you think?
The love story. I think it's possible to find someone that good in the booth. I've been trying to be the Audrey Hepburn myself. So yeah, I think it's possible.
I would say actually my regular boothmate I completely love working with, but I once did an assignment, in fact quite recently, where the Italian booth were so good and gave us such amazing relay that recently there was an opportunity to nominate interpreters for best performance on an assignment, and without even thinking I instantly nominated them because they gave us they were doing a really technical and emotional speech that was really close to one of them, because what they were talking about happened just outside of her hometown. So it lands on her shift. It's an incredibly emotional thing for her, and she has 3 booths taking relay from her, and she delivered some of the most perfect interpreting I have ever seen. And they had 45 minutes of relay between them. And I thought, you know what? If anyone deserves a prize, that Italian booth, for the sheer immensity of their delivery, I thought, as much as I'd love to nominate my boothmate, those guys just did such an incredible job that they deserve all the praise they can get.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a good thing they weren't mumblers, huh? Did you read about the mumblers?
Of course.
I've had some bad relays, man. Like people, and you can't understand anything, and then you realize, okay, I can't understand anything because the other booth, whichever language they're speaking, because they don't understand anything they're saying, so they're just mumbling to pretend they're saying something. Oh God, let's not even go there. It's a total disaster when that happens, because then you're interpreting from their relay, and if they don't, if their delivery is not good, yours won't be either.
Of
But
course.
you can't tell the client, okay, I'm interpreting from the relay, and the relay is bad, so please bear with me.
Right.
Yeah,
You
right.
can't say anything like that. So you look really bad. This is something that is also, I might write an article about that, about the importance of when you have more than one language, of having all the booths have to have good interpreters. I have faced, the worst times with relay, but I've also had some really good relays also, true. But when it's bad, it's a total disaster, because then it's like a domino effect. Everybody falls down together. Oh, I hate that.
So here's a question for you guys on the private market. How much stability do you have? I mean, how often do you work with the same people, or is it different people all the time? That's something I'm wondering about. Because, I mean, stability can be good, but then sometimes maybe it's good that you don't work with the same people all the time, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I think there's a certain amount of stability because definitely I work with a lot of the same people in my booth quite frequently. There's obviously certain, well, not officially a team, but there are certain dynamics that just work well, and so you tend to work with the same people over and over. But I actually had this conversation with a friend of mine because I think if you find some people that you really work well with, that you really play well together with, there's a certain risk of being stuck in that group just because it's always nice, it's always pleasant, it's always a joy to work with them. And I've found myself trying to want to get out of that. Well, I guess it's the comfort zone, quite literally, because you want to expand your colleague network. You want to see how other people interpret. You want to see if, maybe this person is doing that, and that is something that you really like. And I'm thinking, oh, it's such a great interpreter. I could definitely learn from that person, and I wouldn't have known if I hadn't worked with them. So I think you definitely need to expand your stability circumference, whatever you want to call it.
I have, in my entire career, I've only shared the booth with, I think, 4 other interpreters. I have one, my favourite booth mate who we try to work together as regularly as we can. And I think it's because a lot of the jobs up here are kind of 1 or 2 days, it makes it very important that, at least if I have never worked with them before, that I know someone who has. When it comes to filling out the other booths, there's a lot more variation, but Scotland isn't a huge market, so I can tell pretty quickly, if someone says, oh, there's a job in Edinburgh and there's going to be a French and German booth, I can usually guess about 50-60% of the time who's going to be in the German booth and who's going to be in the French booth. It's funny though, for me, stability is more about the right person for the right kind of job. But I now I have preferred London colleagues and I have preferred Scottish colleagues. But just in that, when you asked that question, Alex, I wondered, are there stories of like getting bored of your booth mates that were kind of in your mind when you said that? Because I haven't yet got to the point of being bored with my booth mates, but the way you asked that question made me think, is he about to say, I really wish I could change my team, but scheduling won't let me?
No, that's not what I'm saying at all. No, actually, it's just I think it's natural that you like some colleagues more than others. I mean, it's just human chemistry, I guess. But I found it interesting what Alex said is that sometimes it's maybe a good idea to, leave your comfort zone and maybe try to work with people you haven't worked with before. And anyway, in my case, I don't have a choice. I have to work with the people that our planning department assigns to the job. And, we're all professionals. So it's not really a problem per se. But of course, I mean, just due to human chemistry, there are some preferences, I guess, which is completely normal. But I liked your point, Alex. Yeah.
Yeah, and the funny thing is too, and this goes back to the love story with the booth mate. I have a booth mate who I get along with really well. We work together whenever we get the chance, and we actually have a handful of clients where we're simply like, that's our client, we're the team. So we work together a lot, and it's going so well with her that whenever I work with somebody else, I always compare them to how our usual teamwork is. And it's usually really good, you know. I know when she's struggling, she knows when I'm struggling, like without it actually causing any issues. And then we will help each other. Or, you know, we know when, like, I would know when she doesn't need my help at all. And then I do what I do, and she does the same. She actually plays Farmville on her computer in the booth when it's my turn. So, you know, I think it's just a very comfortable and a very trusting relationship. And obviously, I can't have that with everybody else, but I always, in my, like, in a tiny part, somewhere in the back of my mind, always compares everybody to that relationship because that is just the ideal working environment in the booth.
Wow.
I have someone like that too, and this interpreter who is like the perfect match for me. It's a funny thing when we work together because when we swap turns, people don't even realize it's changed interpreters. Even our voices, the volume of our voices are similar. It's
That's
amazing.
perfect.
And we also have this, it's perfect when that happens. And we also have this eye contact thing with, and we pretty much talk with our own with our eyes. So she looks at me, and I know exactly what she needs. So it totally relates to
It's
what you
amazing.
just said. But I think the whole choosing the team thing, it really depends too on the market. For instance, in Brazil, um, agencies, they don't pay very well. So the best interpreters don't work for agencies. We work for direct clients, or we work for other interpreters who invite us to share the booth, right? Now, in the US, for instance, most of the market is driven by agencies. So you never know who you're going to work with. They hardly ever ask, who would you like to share the booth with? So you'd better get along with people because you never know who you're going to get. Now, if I do have the chance of choosing, I tend to stick with my team because I trust them, because I know they're going to do a good job, and trust is so important in our profession. So I tend to stick with my team. But I am open when somebody tells me, like, I can't make it, but can I recommend you a beginner who's doing really well? And yeah, sure. Why
You
not?
know what the funny thing is too? I think those people that you really get along with very well, if they give you a recommendation, like if my boothmate, that particular boothmate, if she recommends someone to me, I don't even bat an eye. Like I just know if she recommends that person, it's going to be a great interpreter. They're going to be not a diva. It's going to just work. And so with those
Mm-hmm.
people, I think you kind of surround yourself with a
Yeah.
certain type of people. So I think I completely agree with what you're saying. You know, you can recommend a new young interpreter. If it's coming from her, like I will immediately just say, yep, that's fine. Perfect. Thank you.
Exactly. Yeah. You trust them to the point in which you trust the referrals.
I think this is the other thing as well is that the other side of this is that we can recognize interpreters who we wouldn't recommend.
I couldn't agree more.
Thankfully, I have only
Exactly.
ever met one, and it
Yeah.
means that you know when that interpreter is going to be on the job. You just know you have to work harder, and you just have to shield them a bit because you don't want anyone to look bad. But when you're choosing the team, you will obviously choose someone else. And I think it's okay to have people that you think, yeah, they don't work well on the kind of assignments I like to do, so I'll pick someone else. It doesn't mean they're a bad interpreter who should never work again. It's just they don't really match the rest of the team that you would build.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think this our profession is inherently stressful, right? It's on the spot, it's fast paced. We're always dealing with different topics that we have to study for a lot. So why would you add insult to injury? Why would you invite somebody to work with you in your team if this person is either not a team player or doesn't work well for whichever reason? It's very important to have a good team. Something that I face once in a while, especially in Brazil, because here I do have my direct clients, is when I have an event with many languages, for instance. And some languages, we don't have that many interpreters. Let's suppose Russian. I would say there are like three Russian interpreters in Brazil that go from Russian to Portuguese. German, it's the same thing. We have like 2 or 3 that are good that go from German into Portuguese. So whenever that happens, whenever, as we would call it here, an exotic language is needed, sorry, but that's the way we say it. For us, German is an exotic language, right?
Sure,
If you need any Germans, let us know.
Yeah, come to Brazil.
How's your Brazilian, Alex?
Work in progress.
Yeah.
So that when I do have to hire the so-called exotic language interpreters, that's when things get a bit touchy because I don't really choose them. I am stuck with them. And not always are they people that I would work with otherwise.
Yeah.
You know? Then you're pretty much stuck with them. It's either them or there's nobody else.
But I think that's when it comes back to just being professionals, because I always think I've been very lucky so far in the English booth in my market. There's only a handful of colleagues who I don't get along with personally, but professionally, we can still have a great conference. We can still help each other out. They're good interpreters. There's just the chemistry is just not right, on that level. But I think even with difficult people, like you can still have them on the team and they can still do great work. But it's just you don't have to be best buddies with everybody, I think. So yeah.
Yeah, no, it's not about being best buddies, but sometimes, for instance, maybe they're good in the booth, their delivery is good, but they're just people that might give you such a hard time with all the rest. I always say that being an interpreter is a package. It's not just about being fluent in 2 languages. It is not about having only a good delivery in the booth. It's about knowing how to behave in the coffee break. It's about not speaking loud on the phone in the middle of the lobby. It's about knowing how to dress accordingly. There's so much more involved in being a good interpreter than just the delivery in the booth. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's what I meant with being stuck with some interpreters sometimes, is that maybe, their delivery is great, but they make mistakes in all the other stuff, that drives me crazy sometimes. And when you're a chief interpreter, it's really hard because are you going to explain that to the client? Listen, your whatever Mandarin interpreters are not the people I usually work with, but we're stuck with them. Okay, you're not going to do that disclaimer for the client, right? So yeah.
Yeah. No, but Roberta, you gave me the perfect keyword actually, because I wanted to transition to the last article that I wanted to cover and probably to wrap things up slowly. But you just mentioned the interpreter is a package, and you have another article which is called exactly that, the golden package.
Yes.
And that it relates to a story or to a commercial rather by FedEx. Can you tell us quickly what the story behind that is?
Yeah, exactly. I was interpreting for FedEx, and they played a video of one of their commercials from the 80s, if I'm not mistaken. And the commercial was about how they handle each and every package.
There is one package more priceless than all the rest. The golden package.
And it's a cute story from Christmas, and there's this golden package, which is supposed to be like the most special package of all. But because the carriers, they don't know which one is the golden package, they treat all packages as if they were the golden package. And when I saw that commercial, I thought that is pretty much like interpreting, because, I mean, if you work on a lot, one day you're doing medical, then the other day you might be talking about wineries, and then on the other one about quantum physics. We never know, right? And we can never take an event for granted. For instance, I'm a medical interpreter too, so sometimes if a person invites me for an event on maybe, I don't know, a subject that I master, let's suppose, talk about cycling. And I could become complacent and think, I'm a medical interpreter. Cycling is something I master. I'm not even going to study for that.
Yeah.
That is the stupidest thing one can think, because each event is unique. At least for the client, it's unique. For you, it's the third day in a row you've been working, but for that client, he's been organizing that for a year. He's paid for the hotels of the foreign speakers. For him, it's his golden package. So that specific article is about never taking anything for granted. Even if you think you master that subject, I always study, always.
Yeah.
No matter what.
Increasingly, I'm realizing as well that my emphasis in my interpreting is now going as much on what are the clients trying to achieve as it is on what are they saying. The more you realize that every event has a purpose behind it, I think the better you become as an interpreter, because when you have to make quick decisions, you can make it taking into account what the event's for, what they're trying to do. I remember the last time I did a job on fisheries policy, there were times where you were making decisions on the basis of, I've done one of these before and now I understand how they work, rather than, what's the French word for such and such? I remember my regular booth mate, she came into one, she hadn't done the first one, but she came into the second one. And the first kind of block of these things, if you've never done one, the first block is always full of panic because it's so technical and there's as much socially and psychologically going on as there is actually linguistically. And if you miss what's going on socially and psychologically, you can't interpret the linguistic stuff properly because people don't always see what they mean and so on. And for the first 3-hour block, I've never seen her look so worried and scared. But for the second block, she was like, I totally understand this now. And once she got, this is how it works, the study became useful and it became worthwhile. And the rest of the event just went without a hitch, because once you've understood this is what's actually going on, then you understand what people are saying much better. My motto now is that when I started interpreting, I thought interpreting was a language thing that just happened to involve people. Now I really believe it's a people thing that just happens to involve language. And the more I interpret like that, I find the better I interpret.
I totally relate to that. I agree. It's like, for instance, recently I've worked for a pharmaceutical company, and I was working with this booth mate and she told me right there and then, she said, listen, I don't want to scare you, but I've never done anything medical or pharmaceutical in my entire life.
Oops.
I said, that's okay. I'm here for you, and we'll hold hands and it's going to be beautiful. That's what I told her, and she smiled and she relaxed. So that's one thing too. Being relaxed sometimes is much more important than knowing that much. Being relaxed and having a good night's sleep. I never spend the night awake studying because I know it's going to be counterproductive. But anyway, going back to the pharmaceutical event. So that's what she told me right at the beginning. And I told her, listen, it's a pharmaceutical company, so you can get a lot of stuff wrong, but there's one thing you can't get wrong. They're here to sell drugs such and such. This name can never go wrong, And so I understand what Jonathan says, and I relate to it. When you understand why is the client spending so much money on this event? What do they want to obtain from it? When you understand that, it makes your life a lot easier and beyond words, because if you know what the client wants, even your intonation is going to be more according to what they're saying and all that. So yeah, I agree.
It's really interesting that you were telling us an episode from a pharmaceutical conference, because it kind of nicely wraps up the troublesome episode for today, because we started with the delusional interpreter's vain arrogance syndrome and we ended with the pharmaceutical conference. So that's great. So that's it for today, folks. Thanks for tuning in. Again, all our earlier episodes and a lot of funny interpreting GIFs or GIFs, whatever you prefer, can be found over at troubleterps.com. If you like our show, please consider leaving a review on iTunes or recommending it to a friend or colleague. Roberta, it's been so much fun having you on, and if you agree, maybe we can have you back for another episode someday. It was great to have you on the show.
For sure. My pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, everybody else, say goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
Roberta, it was awesome having you.
Awesome, Alex. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure meeting you.
Thank you. Okay, and you guys make me proud. We try to keep it short, but, when there's 4 interpreters on one recording, it's kind of... it's a challenge.
The episodes are great, but they're too long.
The interpreter has left the booth.